were going to win $10,000 or $100,000? Me too. What if you could choose between having one miracle in your life or having limitless miracles in your life? Last question. If you could choose between having faith in God versus having the type of faith that just overflows into everything that you do and inspires the people around you, which would you choose? That's right, me too. So tonight we're going to be talking about that type of faith, okay? The faith that is so full that it overflows in your life and into other people's lives. We all know the basics of faith is that we cannot even come to knowledge of Jesus without faith, right? We have to have faith. But we're also told, Paul also tells us that we're each given a measure of faith. Now, you know, some people have been measured out more faith than others, just to start with, right? I mean, you see those people. They're like, even as children, they seem to have a ton of faith, right? And it just builds on it. The point is not what we start with. The point is what we end with. Because we can all build on our faith over and over again. So my hope is that we all build our faith up while we're here together. Hebrews 11 is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, you know, because it's the hall of faith. It talks about, well, first it defines faith for us, so that makes it easy for us to even know what it is. Because faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance of what we do not see. That's what faith is, and we all get to have that. Okay, but Hebrews 11 also talks about all the people that God is saying, hey, look, they were faithful. It's the long list of people that have been faithful. Don't you want to be on his list? I want to be on his list. And it's still growing. I know it is still growing. And I know we all want to one day hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. It's what we're all after. But it's not easy. It's not easy to get to that. It's not easy to live out our faith every single day through every single challenge we face, right? There have been days, months, possibly years, where you feel like faith is stagnant or it just feels depleted. You just feel like you don't have much faith right now. And you can walk through those valleys. Everyone has to. You know, when no amount of prayer is going to take away your child's diagnosis or your diagnosis. When you are paying the consequence for someone else's sin, that one hurts. When you expected that by loving God, serving God, even being in ministry, that somehow you'd be protected from the worst trials, maybe not. When life is just flat out unfair, because life is unfair. That is when we're holding on to our faith by like a thread, right? Like, oh, we know it, but we're just barely holding on. But you're not alone. We've all been there. We've all been to that place where we've just held on with a thread. The point is that we got through that place. We got to the next place. That is the journey, is continuing in faith when you have to see the things that are not there yet. Because sometimes it feels like these ups and downs, right? We have like these high faith, low faith moments. It feels like we're riding a faith roller coaster. And it's not that fun. You're like, I really just want the roller coaster that's up here, like all the time. Wouldn't that be great? Well, the thing is, I think that we can get off of the high lows of the roller coaster. I think we can get off of that. So we're going to talk about how to do that. We just struggle with knowing like how. How do we do that? I mean, I don't want to feel decimated in my faith. Again, I want to come back strong, but how do we do that? Well, it doesn't come by accident. You don't accidentally stumble into faith that works no matter what your circumstances. Not going to happen. You have to be purposeful about pursuing it. So The Insanity of God is this book. I don't know if anyone's ever read it. It's by Nick Ripkins. I don't have. It's phenomenal. The title kind of could scare you, The Insanity of God. But really, it's about how insanely wonderful that our God is. Okay? And it's about a faith. It's all about faith. If you need a boost in faith, read this book. Okay? It talks about people that are living in real persecution. Okay? He was a missionary to Somalia, and then his kind of the ministry just felt he felt decimated because after 10 years there was hardly any fruit because it's such a hard area to live out faith. So anyways, God ends up calling him out of Somalia, and then he calls him into going and talking to all the different people that are living in persecuted areas and saying, okay, if we have to learn, what can I learn from them? Because they have learned how to live out their faith in persecuted situations, right? So he goes and he starts just compiling all these interviews, like people from all over. Of course, that's how God does it, right? He just like puts all these, these connections and opportunities for him. So he's flying all over and he's interviewing people in places in Muslim countries, in China, in Russia, and he's talking to some people. Well, one of these stories really stuck with me, and it was a story where it was in a Muslim country, and a man, his life was just in shambles. He was at the end of his rope, and he goes to the imam because that's the only religious authority that they have there. He goes there and he says, I don't know what to do. My life is, I don't know what to do. So this imam tells him, well, you need to go fast and pray for 3 days. At the end, you'll get an answer. So he goes. He fasts and prays for 3 days. At the end, he gets this vision, and it's a person without a face, and it says, know Jesus, know the gospel. He's like, no, as in K-N-O-W, not no, as in no, you can't have that candy. So, so know Jesus, know the gospel. He didn't know what Jesus was. He never heard the name Jesus. So in this vision, he also was specifically told, I want you to go down to this city that he'd never been to. I want you to go to this street. You're going to see two men there. When you see those two men, you're going to ask them to get to another street. They're going to show you where that is. And then you're going to go to this specific number on the house, and you're going to knock on the door. I wish God was that clear with me most of the time. Woo! So he does this. He goes, everything, and he left that night. Like, he got up and left. And his family didn't even know where he went. It was that, insistent, go. So he's like, well, this is obviously my answer. So he starts going. Everything happens just as his vision had said. He knocks on the door. This guy opens the door and he says, I need to know Jesus, know the gospel. And the guy takes him and throws him inside, and he says, you think I'm that stupid? I'm not going to fall for this. And he's like, I don't even know what is that. And the guy goes, well, I just came because I'm supposed to come here. And he tells him why. He says, I get this vision. I'm supposed to come here. And I said, I need to know Jesus and know the gospel. And the guy goes, and he goes, oh, because he was one of only 3 known Christians in a population of 24 million. That's the door God brought him to. That door. And of course, he was saved. And he had the journey of his faith just continued on because he has a story to tell. But that kind of faith that just follows wherever we're supposed to go, even when we don't understand, but we know that we're supposed to do something, that is the kind of faith that fills you to overflowing into other people's lives. His story affected us just right now. It's overflowing into people's lives. So my question to you is, are you willing to follow Jesus wherever he leads you? If we want to be faithful, we have to be willing to be a true follower of Christ. And so in your notes today, you'll see that there is an acronym. We're using faith as an acronym. So our F is coming up right now because it is follower. If you want to be faithful, you have to be a follower. Now, a follower is not the same. A Christian and a follower of Jesus are not the same thing. You can be a Christian. You can go to church. You can read your Bible. You can be in ministry. That doesn't actually mean that you're following Jesus. Jesus might have told you to go do this, but you decided that this was better. Still good, better. To be a true follower of Jesus, we go wherever he tells us to go, and we do whatever he tells us to do. And God did not call you to the easy. So a lot of times it's not. Sometimes people are following, they might be doing all those things, but they might be following a spouse to church. They might be following a parent and what they learned growing up. They might be following a religion. So who are you following and where are you following them? So you need to ask yourselves that. But to be a true follower, we have to keep our eyes on Jesus, like constantly. You can't follow someone if you lose track of them, right? When you're following them down the road, if you lose them, it's over. It's gone. You have to follow constantly. You have to constantly be looking ahead of you. We can't follow if we don't know the next step. In my book, I wrote about how I see my faith journey as like ballroom dancing. Because, have you ever seen those ballroom dancers? They like float across the floor. They make it look so effortless. It's like, wow, everyone watch that. It's just beautiful. I think of my dance with God in my faith, I think of it like a dance. So my partner is God, and I have daily opportunities to get out there on the floor. And sometimes he asks me to do a really easy dance. Oh yeah, I've done that before. No problem. I'm gonna get out there, I'm gonna do this well. And we get out there and we move around and we think we know what we're doing and we're looking good. Then other times, he says, I'd like you to come out, but it's a dance you don't know yet. And it's difficult. And that's when we think about it. That's when we consider staying on the sidelines. It's kind of easier to just stay over here and maybe watch the other people on the floor. But God is asking you to get out there, and he is a perfect gentleman. He will never force you onto that floor. He will invite you, and then he'll wait on you. And so you get to make the decision. But the problem is some of us feel really comfortable sitting on the sidelines in our chairs watching everybody else. And if we really want to be faithful, we have to learn how to get out on the dance floor. And our spirits may be willing, but our flesh is so weak sometimes, right? We just sit on the side because we're afraid of the dance. We're afraid of change. We're afraid to submit to God's lead because there can only be one leader in a dance. You've seen how that falls apart, right? You can't have two people leading. Only one can lead, and it's got to be him. Afraid of what others will think of us, afraid we will fail. If I do that and it doesn't work out, what are people going to think? They're going to be watching that going, ugh. Well, when you say no to fear and you say yes to faith, it's amazing what happens. Once we determine that we are taking that first step, our dance with God begins, and he reaches out his hand to us, and we grab hold. And step by step, we are taught by the perfect teacher, the perfect lead. His patience never runs out. His love endures forever. His encouragement makes us feel safe. And his faithful character is worthy of our trust. He's not going to make us look bad. He wants to make us look good. So God asks you to take that step in faith. And as soon as you do, all of a sudden you realize, wow, wasn't quite as hard as I thought. It's that first step that gets hard, right? Then you make that first step and it gets easier and easier. And pretty soon, you're going to be just like those ballroom dancers out there on the floor, moving around. Everyone's going to be saying, wow, look at that woman of faith. Look at her gliding along. She makes it look easy. Well, just like those ballroom dancers that took a lot of training, a lot of time to make it look easy, we have to put in the time to make it look easy. And once you do, once you go, sometimes you are going to stumble. But that's okay, because you learn how to recover, and you learn how to keep going. And most of the time, other people don't quite notice the stumble. You do, but they don't. So do you want to have a testimony of faith that encourages others to step out from the sidelines? Because I do. I really want that. I want them to see me dance with the Lord and say, I want to do that. I want to do that. Decide to be a true follower of Christ wherever he leads, and learn to love the exciting, unpredictable dance of faith. Our next step in the faith journey lands us on the letter A in your notes, and that stands for authenticity. If we truly want to be seen as being faithful, we have to be the same at church, at home, at work, in our communities, everywhere. Because people can quickly spot a fake, and Satan's working overtime to make them look for you. If we want to be the overflowing kind of faith that points others to God and doesn't turn them away, it is going to require some authenticity, like everywhere. I mean, we want to be that light on the hill, right? We're supposed to be salt and light. We want to be that. In Matthew 5:14-16, this is the Message version, which I loved when I read this. It says, here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this as a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. Now that I've put you there on a hilltop on a light stand, shine. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven. That last line is my favorite. I'm going to say it again. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven. You opening up is going to let them see God. We want that, right? We want that. So how do we do it? Well, we have to be honest. And we can start with the little things, like when someone says, hey, how's your day today? You know, when your neighbors, when your coworkers. And you know how we always say, oh, fine, even when it's not fine? What if we were to say, not that, but what if we were to say, you know, my family's really struggling this week. Do you mind? I mean, we would love it if you'd pray for us. And then the next time that comes around, that next week, hey, how you doing? You know what? We're doing so much better. Thank you for praying for us. I mean, this is what God did. Isn't it amazing? You opened that door to sharing the real, authentic things God's doing in your life by just making that little bit of change. And I'll tell you what helped me do this. This is a secret that I figured out, which is based on Romans 1:19 and 20, which says, for the truth about God is known to them instinctively. God has put this knowledge in their hearts. Since earliest times, men have seen the earth and sky and all God made, and have known of his existence and great eternal power. So they will have no excuse when they stand before God on Judgment Day. To unpack that verse just a little bit, it says that God internally has put this knowledge in our hearts, in everyone's hearts. Every human being has the knowledge planted in their heart that God is known, and God is known to them instinctively. It also says that they have no excuse based on what they see externally. Just by the beauty of what God's created, we cannot deny that there's a creator. So God is telling us in his word that everyone knows that God is real. Some people might not say they know that, but God's word's true. If I have to call one a liar, it's not going to be God's word. God's word says they know. So I just decided to act like they know, because God says they know. So instead of using that filter that says, oh, do I tell them this version because they're a Christian? Or do I tell them this version because they're not a believer, they're not a Christian? Just get rid of that filter. Just be authentic everywhere and tell everyone the same thing. Stop filtering it. It's not helping the people that need to know God. So, that little shift can make a huge difference. And that also has opened up. I have never had, by the way, anyone say, what? You're crazy. When I say, oh, you know what God did this week? Oh my gosh, this is what he did. And this is to non-believers, I say this. And then they don't say anything. They're just like, okay. You know how many conversations I have had, though, with people that have come up to me afterwards and said, you know, I'm struggling with this. And you're like the most religious person I know. I'm like, I'm going to do away with that because I really don't think I'm a religious, but okay, fine. You know, but it opens up so many conversations and things that never would have happened had I not treated them like they didn't know God, because they do. And they want to know him more, and they're going to know who to go ask, because you have acted like you are not ashamed of him. So, where am I? So being authentic. I was not always this authentic. Like I said, I used to have the filter. I used to do all that. Not always this authentic. And after being in an abusive relationship for about 10 years, I had learned to hide a lot. I had learned to hide a lot of what I was thinking and feeling just out of self-preservation. Just, that's what happens. So after we split, one of the things that came up was that God had me give me an opportunity to be authentic right away. I had to go to court, and it was my very first court. And I was very nervous, extremely nervous. I had to get a attorney from the Yellow Pages because I knew nobody. Like, this is not ideal. All right, so I get an attorney from the Yellow Pages. I have nobody, I don't know anybody in that town. And she goes, and I tell her that I really feel like, you know, we're supposed to separate out Geraldine. Geraldine is my oldest, and we had adopted her, and she has special needs, and he didn't treat her the same. And I just really felt like we were supposed to separate out Geraldine from the visitations. My attorney was very adamant, no, that's not going to happen. No judge is going to separate siblings. So it's just don't think about it. It's not going to happen. And I said, okay, but you have to ask. We can't just not ask. We'll never know if we don't ask. So I'm fighting with her in the hallway before we walk into the courtroom. And this is not this April fighting. This is the April that didn't know quite how to fight yet. And I'm like, you have to. So we go in there. Oh, and by the way, because of this whole hiding myself and all my thoughts and feelings, I used to just put up a mask. And the mask was a smile. And it happened no matter what. And in fact, it was really hard to take the mask off if I was uncomfortable or if it was a stressful situation. I didn't even know I was wearing the mask. I mean, at totally awkward times, people are telling me sad news, and all of a sudden I have this smile, and I don't even know I have a smile, and I look like a crazy person, right? So I knew this going into court, and so my one prayer was, God, please remove the mask. Because if this judge sees me smiling on the side, that is not going to go well for my kids. So that was my prayer. So we go in there, the attorney stands up, she finishes everything she's going to say, and she has not said what I wanted her to say. And I look at her, and she looks at me, and I'm like, and she I don't know if she rolled her eyes or if she just acted like she rolled her eyes, but she gets up there, and then she's like, oh, one more thing. We would like to separate out, Geraldine from the other two girls. And the judge just looks at me. He just stares at me for 20 seconds, just silence in the courtroom. And at the end of the 20 seconds, he says, I can tell by the seriousness on your face that this is an important matter and I'm going to honor it. That is God being faithful to us. And he did. He honored it, and that's the only time in all my years of court, which I've spent a decade in court, it's the only time that the judge talked to me. And he, not only did he give us what we asked for, he commented on the one prayer request I asked of God. Let it be my real feelings on my face. And he did it. Oh, our God is so good. And he is so good to you too. It's not just me, he's good to all of us. So if you want to have a faith that is full and overflowing, you have to follow him wherever he leads, and you have to let other people see you do it. You have to let them see it. You have to see your authentic self living it out in front of them. And you have to speak up when he tells you to speak up. Although it's taken time, I don't wear that mask anymore. I'm able to be real with people. I'm able to be very authentic now. And I found that the more real I am, the more I admit my faults, my failures, which there's a long list of, I find that God comes in there and he makes 2 Corinthians 2:10 true. For when I am weak, then I am strong. It's those times that people connect with you, and their heart connects with your heart, and you're able to actually minister to them because you are willing to let down your guard. You can't expect them to let down theirs if you're not willing to let down yours. You've got to be the first one. Our next step in our notes is an I, and the I stands for influence. So we all have our own circle of influence. No two circles are the same. Your circle and your circle and your circle, all different. All unique. You are not replaceable. We have to use our circles of influence for our God. He put us there for a reason. That neighbor you have, that coworker you have, that family member you have is not by accident. They were on purpose. God did that on purpose. So some people may come in and out of our lives, and although honestly now with social media, they don't quite go out as much as they used to, right? We're always pulling them back in. But there's people we can lose touch with. But we all have this powerful circle of influence. And circles of influence are powerful. I mean, just look at marketing. They call them influencers. They're looking for influencers. Who can influence the most people? For instance, right now, I am totally in love with my Instant Pot. Really in love with it. It is the coolest thing ever. If you have not gotten an Instant Pot, it's like this new pressure cooker, and it does rice cooker, pressure cooker, slow cooker, saute, everything. You can basically egg every meal from the rest of your life in this Instant Pot, okay? And the coolest thing is it goes from the freezer to the table in 30 minutes. And it's amazing. Love it. Well, since I keep talking about it over and over again with people, I know a lot of people that have actually gone out and bought an Instant Pot. Because that is the power of influence. Even now, you're thinking about it, right? Do I need to have an Instant Pot? I think I need to have an Instant Pot. You do. Not even joking, you do. Now, we can use our influence for good. We can tell them great things. We can do all that. We can also use it to say what not to do, right? I could be like, oh my gosh, did you see that movie? It is horrible. Do not waste your money. Do not waste your time. Do not waste anything on that thing. You're probably not going to go see that movie, right? If one of your people in your circle of influence tells you that, you are going to be influenced, right? We all have the power to influence. It's just how we're going to influence. We really have to think about that. I personally want my influence to be used for God's glory. But if I don't purpose that, the enemy will use my influence for his glory. So you need to decide whose glory you want to reveal in your influence. When I was in my 20s, we moved a lot, like 8 times in 9 years. I consider that a lot. One time, we had to move from Washington State all the way to Florida. It's a big move. It's a really big move when you have 2 little girls and you're pregnant with your third. And when we went to go do this, and whenever we did a move, I mean, it was really taxing for me, right? I did all of the work behind the scenes. I did all the selling of the homes and the buying of the new, you are depleted. So when I got to Tampa, that's where we went, I said, I'm done. Never doing a move again. I'm planting my flag in the sand and we are staying here. So whenever I did a move, because I did it a lot, I knew what I was going to do. I was going to go visit churches right away. I was going to find myself a good church, and that's how I would get plugged in. That's how I would have friends. That's how all the connections would be made. It worked awesome until Tampa. Then I got to Tampa, and it was like, woo! I tried. I found a church. It was great. Found a social Sunday school. Great. Lots of people. Great. I'm definitely going to connect with people. I'm a connector. That's what I do. If I could get paid to do that, oh my gosh, I'd be a millionaire. I am going to do this fine. Get in there, cannot connect with a single soul. It just doesn't work out. It falls flat every single time. I call my dad, and I'm talking to my dad, and my dad goes, well, do you remember when I told you that I felt like God told me that he was moving you there for the lost? And I was like, sorry, what? Me? Like, you talking to me? Like, evangelism? That's not really my cup of tea. I was like, all right, sure. Well, I ended up with, okay, after weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of not being able to connect at my usual way, I was like, fine. My neighbors are gonna be my friends. That's what's gonna happen. And in Tampa, people would come home, they open their garage, they put their car in the garage, and then they close the garage. And you never see them. And they had pools in the backyard. You could hear them having fun, but you didn't see it. I was like, people live here, but we don't know who they are. I was like, all right, that's it. I am going to do a stakeout. I had my girls, and I was like, I put my chair right on the driveway one day when people are gonna come home from work. I sat there on that driveway, and as soon as someone drove in and their garage door open, I was like, go! Little girls, so cute little girls. Go over there, start talking to the person. I come around to rescue them. Oh, hi, my name's April. Come on out, let's have a chat. So we started talking, started getting to know people. More and more people started joining these after work, let's talk kind of, events in our neighborhood. It was growing and growing. People were getting to know each other. And wouldn't you know, most of them, not Christians. Just started, but that's the people, that's the influence God gave me. He gave me these people. He forced me into evangelism. He's like, I know you're not gonna do it unless I put you here. In the 9 months that we lived there, because my flag in the sand did not last. Actually, I lived there 12 months, but in 9 months we had to take it, we had to move. We were supposed to move. It was sand, exactly. God actually had a better plan. I had to move. But I knew that God put me, and he planted me there for a reason. One of my neighbors was a Christian, but had been away from God for a long time, and she came back. Another of my neighbors, she grew up in a cult, and she was really seeking, so I got to lay out the plan of salvation for her. Another neighbor, I was actually able to lead to the Lord. And it was in just that short period of time. But God blew open my doors of what you can do when I ask you to do it. He just planted me somewhere different. You know, sometimes he has to pick you up out of that potter, and he's got to plant you somewhere different so that you can grow more. You know, an oak tree doesn't start huge. It starts little. And you have to keep replanting and replanting and replanting so that it can keep growing. And God only knows where you need to be planted next so that you can grow in a new way. So remember, we have a circle of influence, and we need to use it for God's good. Don't put any limits on yourself saying you can't do something, because that is not true. Our God is full of limitless resources, and you can do it. Our influence is something God can use, he will use, especially once we are truly a follower of Jesus and once we are being authentic with the people around us. So start using your influence for God's glory. Start it today. Moving on to our next one. We are at T, and that is trust. Because you cannot have faith in anything you do not trust. Francis Chan, who wrote Crazy Love, is it Crazy Love? I just blanked out. Crazy Love, thank you. Francis Chan, this is a quote from him. God doesn't call us to be comfortable. He calls us to trust him so completely that we are unafraid to put ourselves in situations where he will be in trouble if he doesn't come through. I love that. Like, if God doesn't show up, this is all going to go south fast. I think of Elijah on Mount Carmel as soon as I read that. So I'm going to go, we can go, if you have your Bibles, go to 1 Kings 18. This is the section where Elijah is facing 450 prophets of Baal, and God had to come through for him. And oh, how he did. It starts, that we're going to be looking at, the end of verse 16. So it says, Ahab went out to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw him, he exclaimed, "So is it really you, you troublemaker of Israel?" I love that nickname. Like, oh, troublemaker of Israel. "I have made no trouble for Israel," Elijah replied. "You and your family are the troublemakers, for you have refused to obey the commands of the Lord and have worshipped the images of Baal instead. Now summon all Israel to join me at Mount Carmel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who are supported by Jezebel, your wife." I added that. So Ahab summoned all the people to Israel and the prophets to Mount Carmel. Okay, and they listened. That's pretty cool, right? That's a God thing right away. He called him a troublemaker when he first walked up, and then he tells him to do something. He's like, "Oh, okay, I'll go do that." That's God, right? He's like, "All right, fine, let's call everybody." So everybody comes. Elijah stood in front of them and said, "How much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." But the people were completely silent. Can you hear a pin drop? Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only prophet of the Lord left. But Baal has 450 prophets." So then he sets this whole thing up, right? He says, we're both going to have an altar, and we're going to have a sacrifice, and you're going to put the sacrifice on the altar, and the God who answers by setting fire to the wood is the true God. And all the people agreed. All right, that's a good way for us to determine who's the real God. We're just going to sit back and watch this happen. All these people. So that's what happened. So, of course, the prophets of Baal put their sacrifice out there. They started calling out. This is morning. They start calling out to their God. "Oh, yes, please do this. Yes, yes." We're over and over and over again, right? With no response. Not surprising, right? And then about noontime, Elijah begins mocking them. "You'll have to shout louder. for surely he is a god. Perhaps he's daydreaming, or he's relieving himself. Ha, ha, ha. Or maybe he's away on a trip, or is asleep and needs to be wakened. Get louder, wake him up. So they shouted louder. And following their normal custom, they even cut themselves. They're like bleeding out for this God that's not there. No response. So at the evening sacrifice, what happens? Elijah says, okay, now it's my turn. He puts together the altar of the Lord, which had been destroyed, puts it back together with the 12 stones, and he tells the people, okay, put the sacrifice in the altar, and now go get jugs of water and start pouring it over. Pour it over the altar. And let's dig a trench so that it can hold at least 3 gallons of water. So they do this. Water, 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 till the trench is overflowing. Then he prays, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done all this at your command. O Lord, answer me so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God and that you have brought them back to yourself." Immediately, the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in that trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, "The Lord, he is God! Yes, the Lord is God!" That is putting yourself out there. Elijah does tell us that God commanded him to do it. What does God command you? What's the last time you put yourself out there? God commanded something for you and you knew it was going to happen. When did you put yourself out there? About a year ago, I came to a writers' conference right here in the Bay Area. And when I was there, I heard about another conference that was just for Christian speakers. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's speaking conferences out there, but not Christian speaking conferences. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I need. Because I know God's calling me. This is perfect. So I'm at this conference and I really want to get the word that they're going to give out. There was hundreds of people there. Hundreds of people could have gotten the award. I'm sitting there, and while I'm sitting in the pew, there's a guy next to me, and they start to announce awards. And I go, hey, listen up. They're about to say my name. And he looks at me with those half like, wow, you are really sure. And then other like, wow, you are really crazy. It's one of those. So they call out the first name, not me. Second name, not me. Third name, me! Wow! Yes! Go God! I run up there, I get my award. I'm like so excited. But the most exciting part was coming back to the pew and looking at him and him looking at me with these like, how did you know that? What just happened? He couldn't stop talking, right? Because I knew in my heart God was going to send me to that. When I first heard about it, I knew God say, "You're going." I told you I'm going to put you in as a Christian speaker, and now I'm going to equip you. All right, I'm going to go. I could have held it in. I could have just known pondered in my heart that I knew I was going to win that. But that would have only helped my faith. It would not have helped the person sitting next to me. When have you done something so crazy that you know God was going to do and claimed it because you're like, this is one of those situations, if God doesn't show up, it's going to look bad. Believe me, God shows up. He shows up. He loves that. He loves for you to have the kind of faith that knows what your Father is going to do. So I'm challenging you this weekend to trust God out loud. Okay? Trust him out loud. The next time he gives you something, he gives you a word, share it, speak it out loud. Trust God for something amazing. Because then God will show up and he will do something amazing. So try right now, I want you to picture the most faithful people you can think of in your life. I'm actually going to be quiet. It's a miracle for 20 seconds. I want you to think of who are the faithful people that come to mind. Okay, now those people that are in your mind, do they approach life with gloom and doom? Are they worriers? Are they overcome by fear? Probably not. I'm guessing that what you do see is the last component of what we're looking at today. You probably see happiness in them. I would say joy. I actually am saying joy, but it just doesn't have an H. When you are a true follower of Jesus, being your authentic self, influencing the people that God has placed in your life, and trusting God completely, happiness and joy will be an outward expression of your inner faith. It will bubble out of you. You won't be able to stop that. When we trust God completely, we have no need to worry. No need at all. We don't need to live afraid. We can take everything that comes at us in this very turbulent and unpredictable life, and we can turn it into something that will be for our good and it will bring God glory. And that is something to be happy about. Not everybody gets to say that. You, as the daughter of a king, get to say that. And claim that. Claim that. You get to do that. I promise you, as we show ourselves faithful to God, he will always return our trust with his perfect faithfulness. He will never let us down. It's not in his character. He can't do it. He can't do it. It becomes this great cycle. Okay, so it starts with a challenge or an opportunity in your life. And then you decide, I'm going to trust God. Going to trust God. He's got this. And then what happens? God is faithful, because God does have that. And then when God is faithful, what does that do? It increases your trust. Oh my gosh, look what Dad just did. And then you end up with another challenge. And then you trust God in it. And then God is faithful. And then your faith increases. And the more you go through the cycle, the more faith you get. You climb out of those bottoms in the roller coaster. You see that next challenge doesn't scare you. It's not like, ah! Because you know God's got this. God has got this. I don't need to worry. I didn't get to my current level of faith without a lot of challenges, without going through that cycle lots and lots and lots of times. But they all build on each other to the point where you're like, I am so happy I got that chance to go around that circle one more time. That just put me right back up there. That just gave me another example of God's faithfulness to me. When you really believe that, when you really believe God's got your back, he's going to be there for you, those challenges don't seem scary anymore. You know, the words joy, rejoice, joyful, they are listed 430 times in the Bible. He wants us to experience joy. He wants us to have that kind of joy that bubbles out of us. Ask yourself this question. Would other people characterize me as joyful? Would they? If they could list 10 things about you, would joy be up there? Because joy it's not something you can fake. Happiness, you can fake. Oh yeah, I'm so glad you made me this breakfast. It's yummy. Joy is different. It's a fruit of the Spirit, and it comes out of the choices that you make. It's the evidence of complete and utter trust in God. Of course, you can pray for joy, but I really think it's a lot wiser to have a really authentic conversation with God and ask him why you struggle with having the joy. Maybe it's one of the things we talked about tonight. Could you be following him better? Could you be more authentic with people around you and with yourself? Sometimes we're not even authentic with ourselves. We have to tell ourselves the truth. Are you using the circle of influence so that they see your faith? Are you trusting him completely? Because if you're doing those things, I really think happiness and joy are going to bubble out of your life. So I'm asking God right now to lay one of them on your heart. One of them that you could work harder on, maybe get closer to God on. And today I'm asking that you come up with one of those and that you make a commitment between God and you. That this is one I want to work on more. Let's not be content to stay where we are. We want to be so full of faith that we are bursting forth, glorifying God everywhere we go. So ask God to give you the opportunities to grow in your faith, to build on those challenges. Because, oh, how he wants to. He wants to call you and say, well done, good and faithful servant. So can you hear him now? Sweetheart, how about a dance? He is eagerly waiting to dance with you. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you have been dancing for years. Don't sit on the sidelines. Get out there on the floor. And I promise you will be smiling and enjoying yourself in no time. Thank you.